Hey guys, it's Kieran. Gonna do a quick full market update. So kicking it off with the recent Bitcoin price action. You can see, for example, from a more macro point of view, we have certain touch points here. So first touch point here, second one here, third one here, and then we actually just broke down below this one here, leaving a huge imbalance here, which is actually filled here by this pop up here. And more recent price action in Bitcoin has been very critical to hold this 25.1, 25.2k region, because if we actually lose that, then there's actually very little structurally in the way till actually almost 21, 20k really. But fortunately here we've had this pop up, and we're actually now going into an area of supply here, because if you notice, this zone here was the region which actually preceded this dump here. So we're going back in this. So it makes sense that people might try to quite short this. And personally, I've been mostly sticking to more forex pairs, commodity and gold setups mostly for now. And of course, I'm starting to nibble in spot as well. But if you draw a trend line actually from here, this point to here, if you draw it like this. I'm not a huge fan of trend lines, but it's just to illustrate this. You can see how actually this 27.5, 28k region, it could be some local resistance. And so we'll see how this reacts here for this recent Bitcoin price action. Looking at certain other things, the main area of demand is really around this support box around here. And if we lose this support box, then again, I'm saying below that, there's actually very little in the way till 20k really, essentially. Looking at this, so if we do actually get above that trend line here, so if we draw it like this, so as I mentioned before, if we draw it like this, then there's actually very little in the way. Or if we get above it, very little, you might backtest it, there's very little in the way, really speaking, till 29k roughly. Looking at of course, the Trendmaster indicators, MDX Algo Trendmaster indicator. If you're interested in joining an amazing community of professional traders, investors, we do weekly market updates and I provide some of them. And of course, feel free to check the description below. But looking at these auto charting tools, you can see how we're actually still above the weekly open, which is nice. Because sometimes on Monday, you get that false move Monday. And then Tuesday sometimes coined turnaround Tuesday, but so far we're still above that, which is nice. So hopefully we can hold above this 26.5. Then you might get a tap of this local resistance here around 28.1k. So these are just some things I'm looking at. And in terms of key liquidation levels, as per the Trendmaster and MDX Algo setup, this is looking at how we've actually got some grab of the 50x and 100x long liquidations. As we know, crypto particularly is a very highly leveraged instrument, and so market moves from areas of liquidity to other areas of liquidity. And so we grab the liquidity here. And so the next, you might get a pop down here, maybe to 26.5, 26.3k region. So that's just some things we're looking at. Looking, of course, at the long to short ratio. Long to short ratio is looking at what proportion of the market is net long. So in other words, if a huge amount of retail investors and traders are buying and going net long, that means the market generally is more likely to go down, because the market makes the fools out of the majority. But you can notice how, particularly on the shorter time frames, we actually had a decrease in the long to short ratio, because usually like above 0.5 means that people are mostly net long in the long to short ratio. But we've actually come down a bit, and so it makes sense that we had that pop up and a bit of open interest actually creeping up as well. Open interest is the opening and exiting of positions. So because the open interest was creeping up like this and the long short ratio went down, there's essentially retail shorting the bottom, and it made sense we had this pop back up. Taking a quick look at other markets as well. So first of all, kicking it off with the Dixie as well. It's very important to consider how we've having this essential channel here. And Dixie has had a bit of a run up so far on the daily and the 4. And we can see how this was a range, essentially a range here. We had this deviation play here, but then we went back into the channel. This is the midpoint of the channel, roughly 103. But so far, this is a local resistance, so around 105, 106. So maybe you get a final push up, and maybe we grab some liquidity here, and then they might get a false breakout and move back into the range. And so we'll have to really see how risk-on assets like crypto stocks really perform in response to that. General conventional wisdom is that as a Dixie cools off, generally that really leads to a pop for risk-on assets. But not always, but generally, most of the cases. A lot of these indices like NASDAQ, so the US 100, are having very similar structures. And you can see it's actually approaching a key resistance here, so around 786, so 15.4k. There's another one at 16.1k. And so if we reject here, then we probably might get a move back down to the 6.6 again. But you can see how we just slightly front ran the 886 Fibonacci, 16.1k. And if you look at actually the SPX, is very, very similar. So, again, this is very critical we hold this. The 4.3k level for SPX is very critical as well to hold. If we lose that, then that can, of course, hurt stocks and Often Bitcoin also has somewhat of a correlation to the US 100 and US 500 as well. The US 30 again. So a lot of these have such a similar structure. So we're really critical levels, and it's so important that we actually hold the 61866. And if we lose this, then you get a move back down to 32.8k. So these are things I'm looking at. So certain other things, of moving on to the Forex market, there has been certain setups that I wanted to bring to your attention. These are setups that I'm actually planning to take once we get that lower time frame trigger. But you can see how we had that daily downtrend, but then we also have this 4-hour downtrend. And so these are some supply boxes here. So you've got the supply box here, another order block here. So once price goes here, I'm going to wait for a change in structure, the potential short opportunity. And of course, if we go straight past this, the next unmitigated order block is this zone here. Very similar to the New Zealand dollar chart. Again, it's in a downtrend. And for me, there's another short opportunity. I want price to go back up to here, wait for change in structure. And this is a key supply box here. And of course, certain other setups. I can also look at the USD JPY as a pair that we also like to look at. You can see how this is quite a strong uptrend. And so it makes sense. I mean, of course, you could have taken that false breakout short here, but I personally would rather trade with the trend here. So you personally, if you want to take a long, I'd wait for a return to this demand zone here for the majority of decision making in this pair. And of course, last but not least, let's look at gold, for example. We can see how we had some lower highs, but it is reaching a critical resistance. So this is essentially, we had this first touch point, second and third. So this is a key resistance here. So if we get above this, then there's actually very little in the way really to this resistance and maybe potentially 2.6k. Of course, the total crypto market cap is still at 1.05 trillion, still having lower highs seemingly. And the Bitcoin dominance just still flirting with this. And eventually the question is, when do we get that pop up back to this key 58-60%, which we haven't really revisited like for 3, 4, 5 years almost now. ETH itself is, I mean, the ETH to Bitcoin dominance is bleeding a bit. And so it makes sense how a lot of these alts are actually seeing low to all-time like lows actually this year. And Ethereum chart isn't as good as Bitcoin. Ethereum is still lagging behind. And this is very much reflected in this ETH to Bitcoin dominance. You can see how, despite Bitcoin had to pop up, you can see how the ETH to Bitcoin dominance has pretty much been a downtrend still. What's shocking actually is that people say stuff like, oh, buy the dip, but you can see how a lot of these altcoins are actually seeing all-time lows for like 3-4 years. This is almost reaching now 2021 low there really. In some ways, it makes sense how people are very Bitcoin heavy, like because naturally it's a safe haven in crypto, and because a lot of these are also seeing all-time lows. But guys, thanks a lot for watching. Do subscribe, and of course, please comment in the comment section below for any specific video requests. I'd be more than happy to make videos on such topics.